minds. And of course, more recently, we have the question of Osama bin Laden being found in Abbottabad. I can find, and I think our government officials have already spoken to the fact that we can't find direct evidence that anyone in the Pakistan government, active in the government, knew about Osama bin Laden. But as the Pakistani newspapers wrote, if someone did know about Osama bin Laden, then Pakistan's a rogue state. And if, on the other hand, no one knew about Osama bin Laden, Pakistan is a failed state. So these are the reasons we have many, many questions. And many in the United States look at our assistance programs, generally to Pakistan and to the military as well, and wonder why they so dislike us in the United States. Well, I thought a lot about it, and I think I know. First reason is, no matter what we say, they believe that if push comes to shove, we're going to side with India, and that our strategic relationship with India comes at their detriment. Second, they view us as someone who's very anxious to secure their nuclear weapons, which in their mind they view as some sort of a guarantee against Indian military action. I don't know how they come to that thinking, but they do. The third reason I think they so dislike the United States is because 6 times in our history we have stopped provision of assistance to the Pakistan military. In their view, we're not reliable. Our laws get in the way. And the last reason I think we're so unpopular in Pakistan is because in some way we can be criticized by the rank and file citizens in a way that they can't quite criticize their own government. And I know finally that the Pakistanis have been terribly embarrassed, sort of historically, by our going public with their shipments to North Korea, by unmasking their nuclear proliferation program, and most recently, of course, this secret military raid into Pakistani territory, which has caused and continues to cause a great deal of neuralgia in Islamabad and beyond. Well, you know, it's going to be a difficult thing. We need to work with Pakistan. We cannot divorce ourselves again, because if we do, there's no possibility of our being successful at all in Afghanistan. So let me turn for a moment to Afghanistan. During the Soviet war, it was not a secret to us what was going to happen if we were successful in evicting the Soviets. It wasn't a secret at all. And the reason it wasn't a secret is we'd see the Mujahideen each quarter, every 3 months. We'd see the commanders, and we saw how they got along with each other. And there was no doubt that once we had accomplished our aims and left, that they were going to start squabbling among themselves. And frankly, this is something that shouldn't be particularly proud of, because over time it brought forth the specter of al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, but we didn't really care. This was in the Cold War context, and all we cared about was the immediate objective. And we were pressing on for that. So it brought about the situation of a terrible attack from Afghanistan against our country, a country which has always been protected behind 2 great oceans, and it was a very strange feeling for Americans. Many of our friends have suffered many terrible problems in their life, and we had been miraculously, and thank God, free from them until 9/11. But this brought forward, finally, the specter of Hamid Karzai, the president of Afghanistan. Hamid Karzai has an extraordinarily compelling personal story, having been a Taliban, having had his father killed by the Taliban, rescued twice by Americans. And on the world stage, I would almost say it's a Hollywood-type figure. Maybe I should say Bollywood-type figure, in deference to our friends from India. And he was fantastic. But on his domestic stage, it was a bit different. And there are real questions whether President Karzai has within him the ability to really be a nation builder. Now, our president announced in 2010 that we were going to have a surge of military forces and an immediate, in 2011, start to withdraw them in July, and he has done that. At the time, I really questioned our president's judgment in making an announcement that the enemy could understand. That is, we're going to begin withdrawal in 2011. And indeed, the Taliban made use of that statement by President Obama, and they were running around Afghanistan saying the coalition may wear the wristwatches, but we've got the time. They're going to leave, we're going to be here. And it brought forth a good deal of fear, as you could imagine, in the public mind, in citizens of Afghanistan. But there were other results and outcomes of that announcement, some good and some bad. The good was that it really lit a fire under the recruitment abilities and desires of the Ministry of National Defense and the Ministry of Interior for the Army and the police forces. And it really drove to a higher level that training. And that's a good thing. But there was also another downside, and that was minority politicians and women's groups are quite frightened about sacrificing the fragile gains that they have. So we're going to be in force in Afghanistan until 2014. After that, I believe we'll be transitioning to a much smaller training force. But the real question is whether or not Afghanistan can develop the human capital necessary to run that country. Because if they can't develop, and we can't help them develop the human capital, then all these gains in Army training and national police training will be for naught. And this is the long pole in the tent, and it's the one we're struggling with the most. I don't know how it's going to turn out. I want to mention for a moment Sri Lanka, because I think when we think about South Asia, we often overlook Sri Lanka. Here's a nation which did the impossible. 25 years of war, wars that gave us female suicide bombers, child soldiers, IEDs, 25 years of war, which they themselves said they couldn't win. And the international community said, you cannot win. Well, they won. They won by the use of overwhelming military force and by bad decisions on the part of Prabhakaran, the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Elam's leader. And having accomplished what everyone told them they couldn't accomplish, I can understand a certain amount of chauvinism in the Sinhala majority population. They had suffered terribly during this war as well. But I have to say, it's 2 years plus since the end of that war, and it's time to start assimilating the Tamils in the north and the east back into society in Sri Lanka. Americans don't view citizens of Sri Lanka as Tamils or Sinhalese or Malays or Burghers. We just view them as Sri Lankan. And it seems to me it's time for the Army to remove themselves from the north and the east and let Tamil-speaking policemen, and indeed Tamil policemen, take care of the security in the north and begin to bring them back into society. And this is not because I'm benevolent, because I'm a do-gooder. This is good common sense, because if they're not brought back into society, it seems to me that we could be doomed to have history repeat itself. Only just a word about Bangladesh. You know, Bangladesh is a large country in terms of population. They're starting to be more and more heard from. They've been relatively quiet, reducing slowly the corruption which permeated the system for a long time. You see our Bangladeshi friends now appearing at international conferences on security and the economy. And it's my impression of Bangladesh that this is a nation that's starting to find some traction, starting to find their way gently, quietly into the world. And it's something that I really, really salute. Nepal, Bhutan, Maldives is something better left to our Indian friends to discuss. I think you know much more about all the situations. But I'm going to leave you with one final thought. You know, when you talk about Asia, we always say Northeast Asia or Southeast Asia. But the fact of the matter is the re-rise of China has made the distinction of Northeast Asia and Southeast Asia less clear. It's Asia, because we're all involved in this re-rise. I believe the same phenomenon is going to happen in South Asia. As I've said, our Indian friends have a look east policy. I believe they'll continue this. I think that over time, the distinction of Central Asia and South Asia will become less and less clear, and we'll be talking about Asia. So I'm going to leave you with that thought and be interested in any questions that anybody must have. And for those of you who can't see, we have a clock down here that tells us when to stop talking, and my button has just gone off. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Rich.
Is that okay?
That's great.